Alright guys, so I'm going to get the day started here. I've dug out my sandpapers here. I think I'm going to try a small area on that door first just to see if it's going to work. Anyway, I'm really not happy with the door on the car at all. But anyway, I dug out all my sandpaper here, and I've got, what I'm going to start with is 800 grit, then I'm going to go to 1,000, then 1,200, 1,500, 2,000, 2,500, and 3. And I am out of 4 and I'm out of 5. I like to go all the way to 5,000 grit when I buff, because by the time you get to 4 and 5,000 grit, the paint is already getting a little bit of a shine to it. So when you hit the buffer to it, it automatically gets to a shine. Instead of stopping at 2,000 or 2,500 like some people do, you have to really work that buffer to get the shine. And by the time you get the shine, you've got holograms and swirl marks. So anyway, the higher the paper, the better the outcome. So anyway, I've done a lot of black cars. I've been buffing cars since the 90s, and to me, that is how you get a really nice paint job. That's how you get a really, nice show car-esque finish, is sanding and buffing the paint. But anyway, there's a lot of work that goes into it, and I thought I would try to explain a lot of this through in detail and show the steps and the stages, because if you've ever had to pay a body shop to do this, that's why the bill was so high. This is very, very time-consuming, tedious work, and there's a lot of stages and steps that you have to follow, or you're going to screw the paint job up bad, especially black. Black is the worst, just to send your car to and have somebody buff it for you. They'll ruin it if they're not knowledgeable on it. So I've done a lot of black cars. I would say that most of the cars I've had that I've painted have been more black than anything. It's probably the dominant color I've painted cars. So anyway, I'll do a walk around on the car and show you. But when I first sanded and polished the sections of the car, and then like especially the back half when I was putting it together, it looked amazing. Now, urethane paint shrinks. This is what I was talking about in the video yesterday. All paints shrink pretty much. Some say they don't, but in some polyester primers, they generally don't shrink, like Z-Chrome, Rust Defender. But if you use a urethane 2K primer and then you put urethane paint over the top of it, all of that's going to shrink. So sanding and buffing it usually gets it out. Now, pro shops, some of the very well-known pro shops that are known for black paint jobs, there's one in particular. They like to start really low on the paper because that's how you get one flat. If you start high on your paper, like 1,200 grit or 1,000 or something, it generally leaves a ripply finish. To get one really nice and flat, you have to start low on the paper and work your way up. So very time consuming. But those shops, what they'll do is they will, the car's painted and then it's baked in a baking booth, obviously. And then they let the car set for like a month. I know one shop in particular will go through and they'll start the sanding process. They'll do like 800 grit on it, and then they leave it, or 600 grit I think, and they leave it for a month. So they don't touch it for a month. Then they go in and they do their buffing, and that month helps that paint shrink and cure out. So anyway, the paint itself, it's not hard to buff a car if you pay attention and take your time. But that's how some of the pro shops get those really laser straight flat panels, is how they go about it. If you sand and buff one really too soon, within just a month or 2 months or 3 months, you're going to notice it looks like orange peel in it again. And what that is the paint's tightened up. That's what I was talking about in the video yesterday. It just looks like orange peel again. But sometimes it can cause ripples too. You can see some ripples in the paint. But anyway, I'm going to show you. To me, the worst part of the car is this door. And I did not give this any time to do any shrinking or anything. And I was having a trouble just trying to get a shine out of this door because the paint was too soft to do anything with. I think I painted this in the winter time, and I started on it like 2 days later. But when you're looking at my car, like even if you're up on it and you look at it, it looks nice. It looks, to the average person, this is nice. And most likely it's nicer than any brand new car, because new cars, they have an orange peel texture to them. So, but when I looked at this car, as from what it was when I sanded and buffed it the first time, it was super slick, laser straight, flat. Now it has orange peel in it again. But this door if you know what you're looking for, is not where it needs to be. So when I get over here and I get down on it, of course you can see my reflection in it. I'll get down here where you can get a little bit better view of it, which the car's dusty, and I just wiped it off with a wet rag, so it might have streak marks in it. But you can see from here to here, see the difference in the depth? This is muddy looking and this is glossy. So I'm going to try to do this door outside again and see if I can get it to match this. So anyway, that's basically what I'm after, is just trying to get this to shine back up. When this has carnauba wax on it, you don't really notice it. The carnauba wax really puts a shine in stuff, but carnauba wax usually doesn't last very long. So I want to remove the door spear, the lock, and the handle and the guard, and then I'm going to back tape the door all the way around with some wide 2-inch tape. I'll back tape it, meaning I'll open the door and I'll stick it on the back edge of the door. Then when I close the door, I got masking tape hanging out here. That way I don't sling compound all inside my door jamb and make a huge mess. And then I'm going to tape right up to the trim right there. I'll do it slow with tape so I get it exactly on the edge. And at that point I'll go in and start sanding it with 800 grit and then work my way up. So here's what the bad thing is. If there's bad body work, that block's going to find it. It's going to find the highs and cut the highs down. So if you didn't really flatten out your panels in the bodywork stage, when you go to sand and buff that with a block, you're going to find the highs in that paint, and you're probably going to go through the paint. So anyway, I blocked mine very thoroughly, but anyway, that's why I like using a little bit bigger blocks. I don't like using little pieces of paint stick and little bitty teeny tiny blocks and sitting there working these little areas, because what that does is induces ripples and bad spots. The bigger the block, the flatter the panel. So, you know, in some cases you can't really use a big block, but especially on a round car, like a 55 Chevy Fender, it's very difficult to work over with a big block. I mean, no doubt you can get a lot of this and this big area here, but when you get up in here, you know, you've got to move to a smaller block. But that is pretty much where I'm at. So I guess I'm gonna take my door panel off, and I'm not looking forward to it. I got to take apart a car that is put together, and I don't want to chip or scratch nothing, but the car's got to be where I want it. All right, so I opened up my trunk because I'm going to flip my battery cutoff switch off, because I'm going to have the door open for a little bit trying to take it apart. I don't want to run the battery down, but I never did show my trunk hinges that I made after they were finished in any videos. So I'm going to you know, show you guys that. This is the hinge covers I made, and at the very last show I was at that I got Best of Show in, the judge specifically called out these trunk hinges, and I didn't point them out to him. He said that you know, the other car that was up against me in the show for Best of Show, they didn't have anything like that, and you know, other stuff too, but that he thought was really cool, a little bit of detail. So what I've got going on in here, I mentioned in the video yesterday, is this piece of Velcro. I just pushed it up there, but it's not staying locked in. So I am going to swap out the loop part on that, and hopefully that fixes it. But I also need to go in here with some flat black paint on a brush and brush my L brackets, because you can see them back through there because they're silver. So I'm going to paint all of these flat black with a brush so they'll kind of disappear. But anyway, if I pull this out a little bit, I can kill the battery. So I have obviously a digital radio in the car that, you know, if you shut a battery off, normally you lose all your clock and your memory and stations, presets, all that in your radio. I have just the wire, the memory wire, the battery power wire from the radio going to a separate fused circuit to the battery directly. So the radio is always connected, but as far as everything else, it's not. So I can kill it anytime, it's no big deal. But that allows me to kill it at a car show and all that stuff with having everything opened up and which I don't know with the space I'm going to get at the show if I'm going to be able to open it up or not. I'll have the trunk open and probably the hood, but I don't know if I'll be able to open the door or not. It just kind of depends, maybe a little ways. So, I'm going to get to it. All right, guys, this is very nerve-wracking work, let me tell you. I'm going really, really slow, taking my time, trying not to mess anything up. So I've got the door handle and the lock out. The lock has the biggest chance of chipping paint removing it. So that was what I was most nervous about, but I got it off of there. Luckily, I'd went in here, I forgot I did it, and I used my little round, small, thin jeweler's file and kind of worked this thin a little bit so it fit a little bit loose. Because, you know, a door lock hole and all your door handle holes, all that stuff out here, by the time you're done with all your bodywork process and then you're painting, you've got a lot of mill thickness built up, so that hole's going to be a little bit smaller from mill thickness. So anyway, had that have been real tight when I put the lock in, when I go to pull that lock out, if it's tight on it, it's going to chip the paint outward. And if it would have chipped way up in here, I'd have had to repaint the door. So fortunately, I got that one out. But I still have that one over there to do. I got the door panel off without any problems. Again, I took my time, worked slow. Door panel came right off. I'm really happy about that. So anyway, I put tape on every hole in this thing. I even put butyl in places where the factory had it. What this does, like these big giant hole openings in here, if you don't go back and tape these up like the factory did, they use like a black, it looks like masking tape, but it's black. I used aluminum foil because I feel like it would hold up better, and this stuff's pretty sticky. But anyway, when you seal all this up, when you're driving your car in the rain or you're washing it with a hose and all the water runs down in the door, it creates moisture inside here, and it'll usually make your door panel boards warp if they're getting moisture, you know, at the back of them. So the factory taped everything up and used butyl in places, so do that when you put your car back together. Also, when you close your door, it sounds more solid instead of hollow. I did not dynamat my door. The main reason is that dynamat's real heavy stuff, and I didn't want to put any added stress on the door hinges and stuff and the pins, and the bushings, I guess. But anyway, the car's really quiet inside for a hardtop. Usually a hardtop has a lot of wind noise because, you know, they don't have the best ceiling set up in them, you know what I mean? But this car is surprisingly quiet. I can actually carry on a conversation driving down the highway, and I've done a couple of video clips and you can hear me just fine in the GoPro. Whereas my truck that I drive every day, you can't, I have to slow way down to talk on the phone or do a video. So this car, I don't have to do that. It's pretty awesome. So on these panels here in particular, I showed all this when I built my door panel and was doing all this. I showed this in one of my videos. I used that foam tape from Lowe's, and of course I just cut thin strips off it's pretty wide stuff. But anyway, I put foam tape on those, and these were actually sealed pretty good to that door. I had to give it a little bit of tension to get it to start coming loose, but this one's got foam tape on it and this one. So anyway, everything came off without a hitch, so I'm happy, man. And I gotta say, after taking the car apart, this is stuff that I like to see when I'm working on a car. You know, usually people will paint their door jambs on their doors, but they won't paint the center of the door for whatever reason. Even one good heavy coat is better than just having bare primer or 10 different colors into there, you know what I mean? But that's just me. I'm pretty happy with it. But one problem that I do have on this door in particular is after it all got assembled and I've been opening and closing it and, you know, having to slam it for the door seals that don't fit very good, the door is actually sagging just a little bit at the back now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my tape off here, loosen up the bolts in there, and I'm going to lift the back of the door just a little bit. When I close the door, it puts it in line where it needs to be, so all my gap will be the same. But as far as now, the door is down just a hair, so I just barely need to move it, and it should help the door close a lot easier. So I'm going to get to it, I guess. This is pretty spooky stuff, and getting that lock out was what I was nervous about. But I got to tell you, taking the sandpaper to the door is what is really going to be nerve-wracking, because the You know, if I go through, it's game over. That's a total resand and respray. I think what I'm going to do is I've got some vinyl masking tape, the thin stuff like you'd use for pinstriping or flames or whatever, graphics. I think I'm going to put it on the outside edge of the door just a little bit and go all the way around, because I remember one of these doors, I don't remember which one it was, I had to repaint because when I was block sanding the door, I took the edge to primer. So I'm going to do the edges when I sand anyway. But anyway, that'll help protect that. But the door otherwise is still pretty flat, so it just needs that sheen brought back out a little bit and get some of the ripples out of it from the paint tightening up. Alright guys, so I've already did 800 and it's got it, you know, pretty decent. I've still got some area that is semi-shiny. A little something right here, like a little bit of a low spot that I need to sand out. But anyway, when I sanded and buffed this door, the paint was so fresh, it was just a day or two old, it was gumming up the paper, and when your sandpaper gums up, it starts getting paint in it. As you're sanding it with paint stuck in the paper, it cuts that soft paint, it cuts little gouges in it. So you're kind of chasing your tail. So I ended up having to use a DA and, you know, a wet DA with it wet, soap and water, and that's the only thing I could do, because I was trying to make the show. I think that was last year or something, I don't remember. But I was trying to make it to the show, and I was painting this door and getting it buffed and everything. But so now that like a year or so has went by, more than a year, it's not putting any marks on the paper. It's sanding really nice. So now I can get this one to match the rest of the car. And you know, with carnauba wax on it, I've had carnauba wax on it, you really couldn't see much of anything. The only thing you can really see is the paint is tightened up. And what I mean by that is, as paint shrinks, it looks like orange peel. So what I did when I sanded buffed the car, I removed all the orange peel, and the panels were laser flat, just flat as could be. And then the paint tightened up and it causes orange peel. Now in areas, as you're sanding that first layer or whatever off, you know, you're going to have areas that you're going to remove more paint than others. So as the paint tightens up, you end up with lumpiness or ripply effect. Let's say I have a little few ripples in it. So anyway, I'm going back now and redoing to see. This is kind of my test panel here, depending on how this goes, but I would love to do the entire car again because it will look phenomenal. And I probably won't have to go back and do it ever again because the paint's probably shrunk about as much as it's going to shrink. It's been in the sun. You know, I've had it at them car shows in the sun all day, and it's been out and about. So, I mean, it's not leaving anything on the paper, and that's a good sign right there. Now, if this was clear coated, this is just single stage black. If this was clear coated, you wouldn't be able to see the paint build up in the paper. But anyway, I did 800 first, and I pretty much tried to knock down as much as I could, but I actually think I need to go over it a little bit more. And I need to do an X pattern because I kind of did straight. In some areas up in here I did a pattern on, but I've got a little something in the paint right here that it will come out. I can't remember how many coats of paint I put on this thing. I want to say it's like 5. I don't remember. There's a lot of paint on it. It really is. So I think I'm going to go ahead and do this again. I've already sanded it and wiped it down, but I'm going to go ahead and do it again. I've actually got one side of this block that has a indent in it. The other side's nice. That's it right there. So what I've got here is just Dawn dish soap and water. And it's generally not a good idea to do this outside. It's best to do it inside, but there's no wind today, like it's not windy. Because usually wind will blow, you know, stuff into this as you're sanding it or whatever, and you'll just gouge the paint. But I'm not too worried about it because there's not really much going on. It's a pretty calm day. So I'm actually going to try to do a little bit of X pattern on it. So I used vinyl 3M, I think it's 1/4 inch or something, tape, fine line tape, around the outside edge, so it's just right over the edge of the front of the door. So I want to do all my mega sanding first up to that tape, and then as I get to the finer, super finer grits, I will remove that tape to make sure it's nice and shiny on the edges and flat too. But I'm basically treating it like body work is what I'm doing. I'm just going a little bit slower and using finer grades of paper, but if I was body working this, I would be using longer, bigger blocks. I like, the bigger the block, the better for big panels like this. You know, it's kind of amazing. I've said it before in the videos, but it's not how good of a painter you are, it's how good of a buffer you are. That's what, when people look at a paint job and it's been sanded and buffed, they're always like, oh wow, who painted that? They don't ask who did the body work. So that's why I won't do paint jobs on vehicles that somebody's already done the body work on. I don't really do anything for anybody else paint wise anyway, but they don't care who sprayed the paint or did the body work, because they just kind of assume that the painter is the one that did it. Alright guys, so that is stage 1 compound right there. So now it matches the rest of the car instead of being dull looking. And there was a couple little spots in the paint after the paint shrunk and tightened up that I wasn't happy with, and they sanded out. But it looks pretty good. Has a good depth to it. I mean, it's a little hazy looking, but that's just number 1 compound. I still got to do 2 and 3, and then after Carnauba wax goes on it, that's really the it factor. I have not found a wax better than Carnauba. Carnauba doesn't last very long, but it sure puts a deep gloss on it. And I've tried a lot of different stuff, but anyway, this is all pretty much texture free now. So now I'm wondering, do I do the car or not? It needs it so bad. The rest of the car doesn't look as awesome as this. I can't decide, man. It's playing with fire, because if I go through the paint, it's a repaint. This is already day 2 into this, and it's in the afternoon now, so I am glad that I decided to do the last 2 weeks, because 1 week wouldn't have got it done, and I'd have been, you know, rushing, and I might have really made a mistake, but I can live with that. I think that it's better than it was, I'll say that. I'm happy with it. I went ahead and wiped, used a really wet microfiber, and I wiped down the whole car because I had compound everywhere. If you ever leave your compounds after the buffer slings it, if you ever leave it on the car for like overnight, it's like concrete trying to get it off. So it's very important to get that stuff off while it's still a little bit soft. But I got it pretty much wiped off. So that'll work, man. Again, it's not perfect, but it's way better than it was. Now I just got to decide if I want to go over the whole car or not, and that's what I'm really nervous about. So I don't know, man. I don't know what I'm gonna do yet. I gotta make a decision. I think I'm gonna take a break. I'm gonna take my dog out and get me something to drink, and I'll just kind of stew on it a little bit. I kind of leaning toward the scared side where I don't really want to do that, the whole car, but I really don't have enough sandpaper, and I don't know if I have enough number 2 and number 3 compound. That was a new bottle of number 1 there. Those 3M compounds, I used to pay like 35 bucks for something for a bottle, it seems like, and now they're 60 and 70 bucks for a bottle of it. And when you got to buy 1, 2, and 3, that's a lot of money in compounds, so I never can buy them all 3 at one time. I kind of buy one at a time when I can. So I don't know, man. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I can't decide. I don't know whether to go ahead and try to sand and buff the whole car or not, man. It would look absolutely phenomenal if I did. Right now it's good enough. I mean, again, it's, you know, the quality of that paint job for doing it in a garage, I think, is decent. And that sanding and buffing, man, that's what makes a difference on a paint job. It really does. You can make a $500 paint job look like a $10,000 paint job with sandpaper and buffer. But you have to put all the new parts on to go with it, or fresh chrome. You know, you have a $10,000 paint job or $15,000 or $20,000 paint job, and you put on old pitted chrome, you got a $500 paint job at that point. That was what a body guy told me back when I was learning in the very early 90s. So, man, the wind's blowing today too, and that's another thing that's kind of worrying me a little bit. But I'm doing little areas and then wiping it down. But anyway, you guys get the idea. All right, so I hit it with stage 2, and it looks pretty decent. It'll definitely work. It matches the rest of the car now, and it's not all tight textured like it was, so I can live with it. So now I'm gonna stage 2 and stage 3 the whole entire car again. So I've got, after wiping this down and cleaning it up real good, I've got a little spot back here by the door handle, a little spot up front that needs some more number 1 compound. I think I'm gonna use my little small 3-inch pad and number 1 compound those, and then I'll have to stage 2 it again. But anyway, I need to stage 2 the whole car with an orbital polisher. I'm not going to use the buffer. The buffer's too aggressive. But if you have like fine scratches in your paint, those orbital polishers work great. Mine's a Bauer from Harbor Freight. They have, at the time I bought mine, they had 2. They had a pretty cheap one, and they had one that was around $100 and something, and it was variable speed and stuff. I don't know if the other one's just on and off. I really don't know on the cheaper one, but I bought the $100 and something one, and I really love it. It kind of changed everything for me on polishing paint, especially black, because black gets swirl marks and holograms in it with a regular buffer, but the orbital polisher will take it out. So, and you work a lot slower with an orbital polisher than you do a buffer. You go a lot slower and just kind of work it this way. But I'm happy with it, man. It's going to work, and at this point I don't think I'm going to tempt fate and do the rest of the car. I mean, that was 2 days in that. I'm still not completely 100% finished with it. So, you know, I could go in on the fender and not really be as nervous about the fender as I am the door and go through on it. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not going to tempt fate. I'm going to leave it. But it looks pretty damn good, other than the dust and stuff that's on it again. But I'm happy with it. But the entire car needs to be done in stage 2 and stage 3, and that'll get all the fine scratches out of it and stuff. Because the car gets dusty, and I use a wet, soft polishing microfiber, and I just wipe it off lightly. It's really no different than using a California duster. To me, the wet rag kind of grabs the dust and holds it in, and then I pretty much just wash the rags after that. But yeah, I think I'm just gonna leave the paint like it is after I get that door finalized tomorrow. But I am done for today. I'm gonna have to polish all my pads, or I mean wash all my pads, and there's a few things I want to get tidied up on this thing. Now I do need to sand and buff the bottom of the rocker, so I am going to go ahead and do that, but I've got to jack it up very carefully and get it on ramps so I have room to get under there. So I do have more sanding and buffing to do, but as far as the rest of the car goes, I think I'm just going to leave it because the paint job, even though it has some really small, tiny orange peel look to it because the paint shrunk, it's still not like a new car has on orange peel. So it's good enough, man. I mean, I can't ask for any better of a job for spraying that in my garage. The front clip I sprayed out here underneath the carport, and I didn't even hang plastic up. So, and that paint is under 200 bucks a gallon. So, well, it used to be. I will say I'm not going to use that paint again, though. I'm not happy with it. It's a little more soft than what it used to be. Anyway, I'm going to leave it. I'm just going to leave it. So, but I've got plenty of other little things to do. I got a lot of stuff to do, actually. So, I did get my cap in from Summit. I ordered from Summit. This is the polished Billet Specialties notch grip cap. And when you buy these, this little aluminum cover is not connected to the cap, so it is very difficult to get on there. I was making up my own words, we'll say, but I need to put this on as well. But I think I might sand and polish that radiator on the front. It looks a little rough, so I might sand and polish the radiator top a little bit where it looks a little better. I've still got to make those panels for the seats. Just a bunch of little things, lots of little bitty things. But anyway, that's a little bit of an update of what all I'm up against here. But more work tomorrow. I don't know if I'll video anything, but more work tomorrow and the rest of the week.